Good morning, everybody. Are we ready to get started? All right. Welcome. I will call the meeting to order at 9:04 a.m. First up, let's do a round of introductions. I'm Nancy Wise, Commissioner and Chair.
Pat Malone, Commissioner and Vice Chair.
Zan Oshiro, Commissioner.
Joe Kirby, County Administrator.
Grant Crony, County Council.
And we'll go to introductions in the room for those who'd like to introduce themselves, and then go to introductions online.
Good morning, Gary Nichols, Community Development Director.
March, I will be public speaking. Suzanne Hoffman, Health Department. April Holland, Public Health. Jen Engel, Financial Services Department.
Craig, Chief Financial Officer.
Teresa Steve, Grant Manager. Benedict, Administrative Specialist.
Tom Weber, Morning Resident Public Inspection Officer.
Julie Jackson, Development Services.
Paul, Shoulder.
Judy Walker, Community Shelter.
Welcome, everyone. Let's see, let's move to introductions online.
Jeff Van Arsdal, Benton County Sheriff.
And is there anyone else online who would like to introduce themselves?
Sam Imperati, Work Group Facilitator.
All right, welcome, everyone. With that, we can move along to announcements. Are there any announcements? Hearing none, we will move into comments from the public. We will take public comment in the room first, and then public comment online. Each person may have up to 3 minutes. And let's see, I have a list somewhere. So first up, I have Marge Pop. Come on up to the table there, and I will start your 3 minutes when you start.
Good morning, Commissioners. My statement is regarding the solid waste process work group. On Sunday evening at 6:16 p.m., we volunteers forming the solid waste process work group received an email from Sam Imperati, the facilitator, greeting us. Happy Sunday evening. I have attached the working agenda and supporting materials for Thursday's meeting. Attached to this email were 13 documents totaling 133 pages of detailed, disorganized, difficult to parse, and in some cases, indecipherable spreadsheet pages upon which we are expected to opine. How, as a volunteer, unschooled in the minutia of county code and land use law, however devoted to this project, supposed to deal with that? Especially since many of the documents contained little hint of what we were supposed to do with them or the context within which they reside. There has been no attempt on the part of the facilitation staff to abstract larger concepts from raw detailed data, despite members' appeals. Significant facts and important concepts are side by side with ludicrously inappropriate and meaningless trivia. Item 6 on our agenda for Thursday's meeting, in the best totalitarian tradition, reads, quick check-in. Are you willing to fully and collaboratively support the board's direction on this charge? Please provide your reasoning regardless of your answer. Are we to suppose that the Board of Commissioners wishes our work group to eschew our personal lives entirely in order to process and somehow make meaning of this overwhelming data dump? Is it not the job of the facilitation staff to provide digestible and meaningful information? There has been little attempt made by the facilitator throughout this process to summarize, place in context, or even explain the intent of the material we have received and been asked to organize, rate, evaluate, and absorb. And several of us have spent a significant amount of time and energy hoping to educate him to our concerns. I am frustrated, overwhelmed, and I feel sad to report that I am at my wit's end.
Thank you, Marge. Is there anyone else in the room who would like to testify? Hearing none, we will move online. First up, I have Ken Eklund. And I have a request from Ken Eklund to screen share. And I'm not sure if we have that capability currently, or if I could get some.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that answer.
Sorry, Ken, you should be able to go ahead and share your screen with the
Oh.
green.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
All right, as soon as you are ready, I will start your timer for 3 minutes.
Great. Let's see, can you see that screen okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Good morning, Commissioners Muldoon, Wise, and Ojero. I'm addressing matter 8.1 on the agenda regarding questions raised by you about the Talks Trash work group. First, I would like to comment on item 3 in the facilitator's memo, page 203 of your packet. So that's what is showing here on the screen. It concerns a request relayed by a member of the work group for a non-work group member to address the work group specifically about the future of waste management in Benton County. Frankly, I'm surprised to find it here on the Board of Commissioners agenda. I would think the facilitator would bring such a matter before the work group itself so that the work group could evaluate whether or not they wanted to hear what the non-work group member had to say. So the next slide. Also, I would think that this question by the facilitator has already been answered by your one table directive. You would like the work group to be the one table where matters of value to the work group are presented, no matter where they originate. I think you intended for the facilitator to facilitate this for the work group. This relates directly to item 2 in the facilitator's memo. I urge you to express to the facilitator that it's very important that the work group engage with these questions. When is it likely the landfill will close? How do we reduce the amount of landfill waste generated in Benton County? What are the county's options for its solid waste future? Whether or not the work group makes a recommendation should be up to the work group. I don't think that you intended for the one table directive to attract valuable ideas only for them not to ever actually be allowed onto the table itself, but that's what's currently happening. It seems a bit silly that the work group convened expressly to consider the future of solid waste in Benton County is asking if it's a good idea to consider the future of solid waste in Benton County, but here we are. Right now, there is nothing in the works group agenda, nothing in the work group's agenda that sees any farther ahead than the next conditional use permit application. And efforts by the work group to get the future of solid waste onto its agenda are being stifled by procedural runarounds such as this one. If you do take up this question by the facilitator, I urge you to direct the facilitator to let the work group decide for itself what will be of value to it, to confirm that it has agency in its own agenda in this matter and others like it. I urge you to empower the work group to evaluate which matters that come to the one table are valuable and relevant, and to release matters that aren't from the one table directive. Please confirm that it's very important that the work group engage with the county's options for its solid waste future. This work group should know about the net zero program underway in McMinnville. It should know about the Zero Waste Initiative. It should know about producer responsibility and its ramifications. It should know what the timeline is for the landfill, about the decision points along the way that will affect that timeline. All of these are vital, it seems to me, for the work group to fulfill its charter, to properly scope a plan forward for the county, one that reflects the county's values. I think many of the work group's members signed up expressly to have a voice in just these matters. That's the end of my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. And next up, I have Debbie Palmer.
Okay, can you hear me and see me? I still see Ken on the screen.
Yes, I can see you. Ken, do you have a way to not to stop screen sharing? Oh,
Yeah, okay, sorry, I'm trying to figure that out.
There should be a.
There we go. All
Okay,
right, Debbie, go ahead.
all right. Good morning, Commissioners Ojero, Wise, and Malone. I want to speak to you this morning about the Trash Talk Work Group in the landfill. But first, I need to let you know that I am an introvert, which means, among other things, I am anxious and uncomfortable speaking in public. I have to write out what I want to say ahead of time, so please forgive any shakiness in my voice. I am pushing through that anxiety and discomfort, though, because I feel it is more important that you be made aware of certain things. First and foremost, Sam Imperati, the work group's moderator, is misrepresenting the community's point of view regarding the landfill. He's under the impression we want to close the landfill as soon as possible. This is not true. We just want it to stop expanding. We want the operators to go ahead and use the already permitted space they have, and then when that's full, close it and revegetate it as described on their own website's FAQ page. And then we want the county to take that time, 10, 15 years, to plan for post-closure waste management. There are intentionally sited landfills and accidental ones. Intentionally sited landfills are in dry climates remote from human habitation and water tables. Dry climate because the wetter the landfill, the greater the methane and leachate production. Remote from human habitation and water tables is self-explanatory. Republic Services has an intentional landfill just across the Columbia River in Washington, the Roosevelt landfill. It gets less than 8.5 inches of rain a year. It is underlain by over 300 feet of solid clay with, quote, 1,500 feet of separation from the bottom of the landfill to the closest regional aquifer. And it is in a county with a population of less than 300 people. Compare that to the Coffin Butte landfill in Benton County, which has a population of over 92,000 and averages 58 inches of rainfall per year. But back to my point, Coffin Butte landfill is an accidentally sited landfill, an accident of World War II in Camp Adair. It was never intended to be long-term, never designed to get this huge. But unless you put a stop to it, this landfill will continue to expand ad infinitum. I am a member of the community group VNEX, Valley Neighbors for Environmental Quality and Safety. I encourage you to visit our website, coffinbuttefacts.org. There you will see that what unites us is opposition to expansion, not closing as soon as possible. Bottom line is, I believe we all want the same thing. We want to do something to combat the climate crisis. Landfills are just below the oil and gas industry as top greenhouse gas emitters. We want a better plan for the future of solid waste management in Benton County. I believe that was the original intention of the Trash Talk Work Group, not to come up with the plan, but to engage in a process that would lead to that plan. And I also believe that is the primary reason for those who applied to be in the work group. Alas, Mr. Imperati seems to not be helping us down that path. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. And one of my favorite quotes I like to remind myself is speak even if your voice shakes. So no judgment. Is there anyone else online who would like to testify? Hearing none, we will move on. Next up is to review and approve the agenda. I do have one change to make to the agenda. I'm going to rearrange a little bit after work session item 4.2. We're going to move to old business item 8.1, just for ease of having our staff here and getting it all done in a timely manner. Any other changes to the agenda? All right, I will consider that approved. Moving into our work session, first up, we have the COVID update from Department Operations Center. And with us in person, we have Suzanne Hoffman and April Holland. Welcome.
Good morning, commissioners. As always, I'm Honored to join April Holland as she provides you with her regular update on the Health Department Operations Center and COVID-19 update. April?
Thank you, Suzanne. Good morning, commissioners, Joe, Vance, everyone here. It's nice to see you in 3D, many of you for the first time. So update for you today. Gratefully, the pandemic looks very different than it did in March 2020, to be sure. But as we know, it's still with us and continues to disrupt our lives. And right now we're tipping into the fall and winter season, and reported cases have started to increase. CDC reported the case rate in Benton County as 117 per 100,000 residents. And that's up from 77 per 100,000 from the last update 2 weeks ago. Hospitalizations here in Oregon have been mostly steady with some recent slight increases. The total hospitalized the coming storm will bring, we should be prepared to increase our protections against the coming rains. We ask that our community members seek the improved protection of new bivalent COVID-19 vaccine boosters as soon as they are eligible. The choice to put BA.5, the Omicron strain, in the new bivalent booster is still looking like a really good one. The boosters are always going to be a step behind what's currently circulating. But the good news is that this new booster is going to be 1 or 2 steps behind rather than 5 or 6 steps behind. At this moment, people 12 and older are eligible for the Pfizer bivalent booster, and those 18 and up are eligible for Moderna if it's been at least 2 months since the last COVID-19 infection or the last dose of COVID-19 vaccine. And we know that some folks are still having trouble finding appointments for the new bivalent booster. A supply of the updated vaccine will continue to arrive in Benton County over the coming weeks, and appointments will be easier to get as we continue to receive more vaccine. Unfortunately, I need to share with you that we're facing some serious challenges this week with short-term delays in both the bivalent Moderna and Pfizer boosters. However, booster appointments are available out in the community in area providers and pharmacies. Our OHA partners will return to Benton County this week, at the end of this week into next week, and we will hold community clinics as vaccine is available. This is brand new information as of last night and this morning. There are some delays in bivalent vaccine boosters coming into Oregon. So we will continue to update our website and social media as we determine whether these community events can be held. However, overall, the bivalent booster has seen some really impressive uptake here in Benton County. Our first week out, there were far north of 2,000 doses administered. Just in the last week, again, over 2,100 COVID vaccines were given, 1,900 of which were the bivalent booster, including 8 people over 100 years old, which is great. And then we're still vaccinating little ones as well. 63 babies, 6 months to a year, received a COVID-19 vaccine last week. Vaccinations are occurring right now with the bivalent booster. We are prioritizing for our vulnerable populations. They are occurring at long-term care facilities through 2 mobile pharmacy teams, as well as the OHA mobile vaccination team. And pharmacies and primary care providers are vaccinating. They are increasing their share of the overall vaccinations administered this past week and the week before. So in addition to vaccination, please continue to consider the risk to yourselves, your family members, and your community, and layering protections as appropriate, keeping an eye on that pandemic weather. and layering protections as appropriate, such as considering wearing masks in crowded settings when traveling, etc., and seeking areas that have good airflow. We are likely to see bivalent vaccines expanded to younger age groups as early as approval. The emergency use authorization could come as soon as October 10th. So providers are pre-ordering for those vaccines right now. Pfizer will have a new formulation and Moderna will use a different dosage of the same bivalent as used for adults. The more uptake we have in our community, the better prepared we'll be for the upcoming winter. And then finally, speaking of winter, sometime between now and Halloween, it's also time for annual flu shots. We've had a quiet few flu years, but as we gather more en masse, we're likely to have a marked increase in flu this year. We often look to the opposite hemisphere for signals, and our friends in Australia had a much tougher flu season than has been seen in the last few years. Our healthcare systems, importantly, remain strained. From hospitals to availability of long-term care beds. So we encourage all to avoid further strain and protect yourselves both from COVID-19 infection as well as from influenza. That's all I have for you today. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Comments or questions?
Sure. April, you mentioned about the vaccine shortage. Or close to a shortage. John?
Sorry, my mic was off. Sorry,
Oh,
please
okay.
continue, Commissioner Malone.
I thought he was waving at me. Oh, well. I assume that's the bivalent version that's in short supply currently.
Thanks, Commissioner. So yes, the bivalent boosters are experiencing a short-term delay of the very last shipments that were ordered. So we hope to get shipments just a few days later than we otherwise would have expected them. But due to the tight timelines in our planning, sometimes that can impact operations such as clinics. It could have short-term impacts on providers and other locations because we all are trying to use the vaccine we have as much as possible before receiving a new vaccine so that it can be distributed appropriately throughout the state. So with this unexpected delay, we might have a bit of a lapse until the vaccine arrives.
Great. I didn't quite understand what kind of delay we were dealing with, but that sounds manageable. You mentioned variants with a lot of numbers and letters behind them. Is it accurate that there are slight variations on what's already been around?
They're all subvariants of something we've seen already. Slight is really subjective. It depends on what exactly you're pointing at. There are a few variants out there that are concerning in their immune evasion to certain monoclonal antibodies and other treatments. So it is important to keep a close eye on in which ways they're evading immunity and our supply and availability of adequate treatment.
And I'm glad you mentioned the flu season in Australia, and heard reports that after a couple very light years, flu is back, and I guess the good news is it's a different vaccine, but a lot of the things that we've learned from COVID about washing hands and wearing masks when appropriate, and social distancing being outside, if you have that option, seems like 4 or 5 staying home when you're sick, if that's appropriate. Maybe I'm up to 5 now, but it's a
Commissioner, I think you've been paying really close attention in the last handful of years here. Thank you. Those are absolutely the keys for limiting transmission of respiratory viruses, and it goes for COVID-19 and it goes for influenza. So absolutely, one thing that I would say with that we see with influenza more than has been seen with COVID-19 is that flu can sometimes spread by surfaces. So the hand washing, while it's very important with COVID-19, perhaps as important, if not more so, to avoid flu. So keep those hands clean, keep up your elbow bumps, sneeze into your sleeve. All those tips and tricks are important.
we need little cards with the 5, so that we remember to do all 5, or whatever the number is. Appreciate your update, and it sounds like we're in pretty good shape for going into fall and winter, and thanks for the update.
Thank you.
Commissioner Oger?
I just have a quick question. You mentioned that the Benton County Health Department is really focused on the most vulnerable populations and called out the long-term care facilities. And that those residents of the long-term care facilities are being vaccinated by mobile units. Are those county mobile vaccinators, or is that OHA?
It's a mix, Commissioner. So we work with pharmacies. The state also works with pharmacies to schedule COVID-19 clinics at long-term care facilities. So sometimes it's to name drop, I guess, Safeway might go into a long-term care facility. Sometimes there are complications that can make one of the commercial pharmacies challenging to get them in. And so in those cases, we have with our very small team gone in, and by team, I mean Cindy D'Angelillo, our amazing immunizations nurse, will go in and provide those vaccinations as needed. So we make sure that no long-term care facility is left out.
Thank you.
All right, very good. Any other comments or questions? All right, thank you very much, April and Suzanne. We really appreciate your time today. And before I move on, I do have one question to clarify. We do or do not have an executive session today?
Commissioner, we do not have an executive session.
All right, I apologize. That's what I thought. I missed that when I went through the agenda. So that is one other change for the agenda. No executive session later on. All right, and with that, we will move into our update from Benton County Talks Trash Solid Waste Process Work Group. And we have with us Darren Nichols, our Community Development Director. Welcome.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you very much. Again, this is the first of 2 conversations that we'll have with you today. This is the status update on the project. So just want to make sure that our facilitator, Sam Imperati, is still with us. I want to make this part of the update fairly quick, give you a chance to ask questions, check in, and then help us move into the more substantive item, which is a project kind of check in with some really important questions that you have asked and that we want to provide an opportunity to discuss and provide direction. So we've had, the work group has met twice now on September 8th and September 15th. We are scheduled this week for meeting number 3. Thursday, October 6th will be the work group's 3rd meeting. So just in terms of the overall schedule, this will be meeting number 3 of 8 scheduled meetings. We have also on the last 2 Saturdays had engaged in a couple of informational tours, which have been, I would say, very informational, educational, both of them. This last Saturday, we toured the neighborhood as hosted by a number of neighbors. We toured the area around Coffin, Butte landfill. We viewed the landfill from different vantage points. We heard from several community members who live in that area, sharing what it's like to live near and operate businesses near a landfill. And then at the end of, I think, a nearly 3-hour tour, we were hosted to a potluck lunch, which was really wonderful opportunity to meet and spend time together just as people. The Saturday before that, Public Services gave the work group and members of the public a tour of the landfill itself. So we got to go right up on top of the landfill and see what that operation looks like on a Saturday morning. And so it gave us a very up close and kind of personal view of how the operation works. Public Services had staff on hand to answer questions. They provided a bus and took us all up there. So that is where we are just in terms of process. I should probably let Sam see what Sam would like to add about process. Sam.
Thank you. Good morning, commissioners. That is a complete summary of where we're at, with the addition that there has been numerous offline in-between meeting conversations that have led to teeing up the questions before you for the second part of this event.
Thank you.
So any questions for us at this point? I guess I missed one piece, and Sam may want to talk about this a little bit too. The work group has assembled a couple of subcommittees to get deeper into the weeds on topics, which we value and appreciate. A few members have expressed interest in getting down into kind of a more detailed conversation around a couple of items. Sam, do you want to share that with the board?
Thank you, Darren. So the overall charge and associated work plan is designed primarily as a bridge process to provide common understandings that could be used going forward, both in any CUP expansion application and in the ultimate doing of the solid waste management plan, or the SMMP as it's referred to here. Those common understandings do involve a lot of information and detail. And the goal of the documents that were provided on Sunday night was, in fact, to take the initial staff documents. We gave everyone on the work group an opportunity to review and literally change them. Their comments were all rolled up, and that is what was presented on Sunday night. There will be an opportunity on Thursday night to get the big picture overview of what folks' reactions were to the initial staff work. And it's never the intention that we would take a poll on Thursday as to the efficacy of those documents. The intention is that we will stand up these subcommittees, one for each of the major topics. Volunteers from the work group, and based on your decision a couple of weeks ago, volunteers from the public will be able to be on those subcommittees, vet the materials, make recommendations, and then send it back to the work group for a rolled up and more condensed presentation and an opportunity for them to be heard. So we're going to have one of the biggest concerns in the assessment was the concern that Republic has not lived up to the conditions that have already been in place. So as a result, staff took a first shot at putting all that together and their views. Members commented. We've rolled them up. We'll give a quick overview on Thursday, then the subcommittee will do its work and report back. Likewise, the table of contents for scoping the SMMP in the future, same thing. Staff put together the tables of contents from other jurisdictions. The members were given an opportunity to identify which ones they wanted to look at as models. Before going on his Italian honeymoon, for which I'm greatly envious, Daniel put together a condensed version of all that. Again, work group members had the opportunity to do it, to comment on it. They did. The very helpful comments. They're rolled up, shown to the committee, and the work group will continue to vet them to finalize it. There's a legal committee. There's a lot of back and forth as to what the law is or isn't. And the legal committee was stood up. I sent out an email to Vance, to Republic's lawyer, and which is Jeff Condit out of Portland, who was on the Republic tour, and Jeff Kleinman, who is the attorney for some of the neighbors, to volunteer to look at those legal issues. So we get all sides of the perspective from actual lawyers who make their living doing this. And then the work group can consider that advice going on. Thank you.
Thank you. So to clarify my understanding, there's 2 subcommittees were formed?
There is actually going to be a third subcommittee. So there's a CUP subcommittee. There's a subcommittee to work on the table of contents for the SMMP. There's the legal subcommittee. And then we're also there's probably going to be a subcommittee on the overall common understandings documents to vet these issues.
All right, exciting. And did I hear you say additional members from the public will be added to the subcommittees?
Yes, we already have one. The 4th committee, which was stood up before, was it's really involving the size issue. So how much airspace is on Coffin Butte? How much is available? How is that impacted? When is it going to be at capacity with or without an expansion? So all that underlying work is being done, and that subcommittee was set up at the last meeting. It's common knowledge that subcommittee exists, and we will ask again for that. Republic has responded to some of the information. All that went out, and we'll formally get it moving Thursday.
All right, very good. Other comments or questions? Nope. Anything else from you, Darren, before we move on?
No, thank you.
All right. So with that, we will move on to item 8.1, pardon me. Questions raised by the Board of Commissioners and Facilitator relating to the Benton County Tox Trash Work Group. So because this is such an important topic and issue for the community and for all of us, I put together an outline to sort of guide the conversation today. Could you pass one of those down to Joe, please? I also will send a quick email with this. There is a lot of information in play. There's a lot of moving parts to this. We have our solid waste advisory council. We have our disposal site advisory committee. We have the planning commission. We have the Benton County Tox Trash Work Group. All those have bylaws and they're in our code, and then there's information about them in ORS that regulates them. So it's a lot to understand. For me as a commissioner, and I believe for the Board of Commissioners, for us to do our job well and to help guide the community through this, I just feel like we need to all be on the same page, understand everything in the same way, and help provide direction for our work groups. So with that, like I said, I have this outline. I guess process-wise, I would like to sort of take the questions from the staff report one by one. And I haven't read my sort of general thoughts, questions, And then I will look to my other commissioners to share their input and ask questions. And then we can hear from staff and then move on to the next question. Does that sound like a plan?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So, number one, what should the relationship be between appointees of the Planning Commission and the Solid Waste Advisory Council, Disposable Site Advisory Committee, and their appointing bodies? What are the roles and responsibilities of the representative members to their appointing bodies and vice versa? So really this question in my mind is, what is the role of the appointee? Are they a liaison? Are they one person who is there to, check the box on a certain representative of those interests? Or do they come back to the Planning Commission, to SWAC, to DSAC, and update those bodies? Do the bodies provide direction or recommendations to the appointee to take back to the work group? I've heard some feedback that, okay, we have this one table discussion, but if we're funneling input through these other groups, through the appointee to the work group, does that conflict with the one table rule? So looking at the work group charter, it talks about organization/interest group and then work group members. Under D, work group commitments, section 10, one of the commitments of the work group member from a organization or interest group is to consult regularly with their organization/interest group and provide their input in a clear and concise manner. Under additional provisions, the following provisions apply to the work group process: regular communication with affiliated group. There's an expectation of regular two-way communication between a work group member and their organization/interest groups. This is intended to ensure meaningful representation of those interests. Time will be set aside on the work group agenda for reports from this outreach. So to me, that does clarify that the role is more of a liaison role that goes back and forth. And that the appointed body would give feedback to the work group member. However, how is this working in the real world? Is this serving our committees and our work group well? Do we want to proceed with that? Do the commissioners want to modify that? Is it impacting our one table rule? And then I added up there just the text about the one table, but I'm sure we all know what I'm talking about. So comments, questions from commissioners?
I guess my understanding was that the folks that are wearing two hats, the members of the Solid Waste Advisory Committee and the Planning Commission, were just like everyone else around the table, liaisons to the larger parts of the community that they represent, and that they were to carry their communications in both directions, and report back to the committee that they work with and bring that feedback into the work group process. I think part of what I see that isn't working is all of the extra communications in the email that's flying around between meetings rather than occurring at the consensus table, which makes it much harder to track the conversations and much harder to keep a clear, much harder for the facilitation team to keep a clear sense of what the issues are, because there are too many threads.
I agree with that. Commissioner Malone?
Yeah, the one table idea, now that we're at least 25% through the intended process, is I think we've got to emphasize the work group's efforts, that like you say, the side conversations and several complaints about the volume of information that's required. And I see our hiring facilitator maybe struggling to keep up with volume of information. I think it's important to focus on the work group. It's a limited duration. I think that's called ad hoc, if my Latin is correct. And make sure that the resources and the emphasis is on the work group. This is a significant effort by Benton County, and I think what I've seen is distractions and not focusing on the charge of the work group. So I think the one table idea needs to be emphasized. We've got, as far as the schedule, approximately 2 months left in this process, and I'm concerned about getting through what the work group is supposed to get through in remaining time.
Also, I'm sorry, Darren, would you like a hard copy of this? I did make one for you.
It's okay. I'm following. And thank you. As long as I can get a copy later, that I appreciate it.
Perfect.
And I guess this is probably a question for you, Darren, is it comes down to staffing issues, and do you have the staff to do the work group and SWAC and Planning Commission simultaneously?
To be clear, no, we do not have staff to keep up with the multiple tables. And I think that's partly why we're feeling spread extra thin at the moment. So I appreciate the fact that this is a limited duration period in which we've been advised by the assessment to essentially take a time out and focus some conversation here about how and what we should do, or what we should ask the board to lead us through into the future. So in a lot of ways, this is an opportunity for all of us, our community at large and our staff, to focus on asking these few questions and then give you a chance to provide some bigger direction going forward. And so that may involve some additional staff needs when we get into the bigger conversations and the more in-depth conversations. But for the moment, we don't have the staff to keep up with multiple tables.
Commissioner Ojero, oh, sorry, did you have a follow-up?
No, I just appreciate the clarification in that. Makes it fairly easy for me to say, let's focus on the work group for the remainder of the schedule.
Okay, Commissioner Ojero, and then I have a question for Sam.
Yeah, I appreciate, I just want to say, I really appreciate this organized way of walking us through the questions. But I'm feeling a need to step back just for a moment and into the bigger picture context here. And to acknowledge that as the longest serving commissioner at this point in time, with only 6 years under my belt, that I'm personally feeling a lot of, the word that first came to me was grief about the way this process has unfolded. Because I think a lot of this conversation should have been held with the community at large as we were going through the franchise renewal process. That would have been a very appropriate time to have these discussions. But because we were in the depths of COVID, and because we didn't have a good historical record developed internally about past decisions about land use, the landfill and past expansions, I feel like we made some of our decisions in a vacuum. So what we are doing now is so very accurately described by Sam and Darren as a bridge. And we are asking the community wholeheartedly to help us build that bridge right now, to have, the just enough information we need to have, and a better set of understandings in the community about what we'll need in order to receive a potential conditional use permit application from Republic Services. But we know we have to have this larger conversation about the direction of solid waste in the community and about the role of the landfill in solid waste management in the community. But we've deliberately divided that into 2 bites. This is the first bite, this bridge piece. And we're not going to get to all the answers. It's inevitably going to be somewhat superficial, but we've got to take the temperature and figure out where we are as a community with respect to these issues. And then we'll have our second bite, which we've already talked to the working group about. And that is the much more intensive process of engaging an outside consultant to help us put together this materials management, sustainable materials management plan. And in that context, of course, we have to know what we're asking that consultant for, right? So that's part of what you, as work group members, are doing, is helping to shape what it is that we will be asking that consultant. And this isn't, again, even there, the final answer. It's a bridge, because we'll go through additional public process as we start to put together that RFP, request for proposals, for a consultant to do that planning. So there'll be another opportunity to say, okay, what we're looking at is how best to keep a landfill operating in Benton County for the next few decades, or whether we're looking at how best to use this landfill to the best of our ability now and start thinking about what it looks like to wind it down. So we know that that is the elephant in the room. We know that we need to get there, but we're not going to get there in the next 10 weeks. It's just not possible. So what we are hoping to do today is to try to, by walking through these questions that Nancy's so well laid out, get to how to build that better bridge, and stop talking about process and really focus on the work that we need to do between now and December, or if we have the opportunity to extend it, what that might look like.
Amen. Amen, sister. So before Sam, I ask your question, Zan, I just want to highlight that I appreciate you identifying an area that we could have done better in. And I just want to ask, are you committed to doing better in the future? I'm committed to doing better in the future.
Absolutely. We need to have better historical record of any decision we make as a board and have it available for future boards of commissioners, because I feel that that was one of the biggest gaps in this whole process, was not understanding what past boards had done, why, and what the underpinnings of those decisions were. And it's not a good way to make decisions.
Yeah. Commissioner Malone, are you committed to doing better?
Absolutely. I mean, I feel the need for better information, which leads to better decisions. And so,
All right. Very good.
yes.
Awesome. All right, Sam. So how has it been going, in your opinion, with this liaison role for work group members that are on some of our other boards? Do you believe that that is working as intended, or should we make some tweaks to it, or do you have any advice for us?
I think it's a challenging environment when you have an issue as important and as controversial as this, to create any process that's going to satisfy everyone's interests at the same time. I purposely designed the membership to have 2 members of SWAC and 2 members of the Planning Commission, because of both of those groups' key roles and functions in this process. As a practical matter, the one table is a matter of efficiency to bring voices together in an organized way to explore these issues. Unfortunately, it's turned into a debate where the process and resistance to developing the common understandings that are necessary for the bridge has really interfered with our ability to get the work done. And all I guess I'm asking is consistent with what I believe is the emerging, if not already existing, direction from the board, is if we can give this process a shot and get a good set of common understandings, to have the beginnings of a record in place, you will have the best chance of long-term success.
Okay,
I-
so, oh, sorry.
No, that's fine. There's much more to say, but I don't want, I know your time is precious, so
Sure.
please continue.
Yes. So the way I see it, we have a couple different options. We can keep the appointee role from appointed bodies the same as it is, and just send the message that we do expect that the side conversations stop, and that and ask members to really focus on the communication just at those meetings, if and whatever meetings in the future of SWAC, DSAC, Planning Commission happen. Or we could make a change and say there is no back and forth communication. Commissioner Odro.
I think that what I'm hearing, just to boil it down to the substantive issues, is that in the ideal world, there would be much more of a two-way liaison role. And that's the way we had set it up. But because of the fact that the Benton County Talks Trash one table and the Solid Waste Advisory Committee and the Planning Commission all rely on the same staff at Community Development, and that staff is already spread really thin, and we've heard comments from working group members about the fact that documents are not prepared at the level people want already. If we really want to focus on this bridge, we need to take some load off of our staff. And that might mean really, and I've said this before, and I feel very uncomfortable about it, but this pausing the Solid Waste Advisory Committee meeting for a while so that Daniel Reddick can focus on this one table and can really dig in and do the work we need him to do. And have the Planning Commission focus on all of the other things that are on their plate, because they have lots of other work that they're doing, and not focus on this right now, but come back to it. And that's my perspective, just from respect for staff capacity and the need to do things right, rather than spread ourselves out so thin that we can't even get the work done.
Yeah, I can agree with that. And that topic I do address a little bit further down the line too. Any other?
No, I said,
So it sounds like, I guess I really would like to, before we move on, I would like to clarify if we are going to keep the liaison role as defined by the work group charter, or if the commission would like to change it.
Oh, I think that there are other, everyone else around the table also plays a liaison role. So it's not quite as black and white,
Okay.
Because all of folks that are around the table are also reporting to their neighbors and to colleagues at Oregon State University, or other people in the construction community, or, so that still exists. I think it's just the Solid Waste Advisory Committee and Planning Commission function roles that are the biggest friction point.
So do we want to keep roles for our appointed bodies, Benton County appointed bodies, the same, or do we want to change them?
Personally, what I'm saying is that because of staff capacity, I think that we should.
I know, I'm possibly cancel the meeting or
Yeah.
postpone meetings.
Yeah.
Yes, I understand that, but sometime in the future, they will meet again, and then
Yes.
we will still have this issue of
Yes.
back and forth.
Well, I
So I'd
think-
like to just iron that out now.
I
if we
think
can.
the liaison role is important, but we need to acknowledge the capacity, limited capacity at this time.
Sure. Sam, I see your hand.
Thank you. Commissioners, respectfully, I don't think it's a issue of to have a liaison or not. I think it's essential that there be a liaison role. I think the dynamic that's playing out is some members of the work group are trying to access SWAC and Planning Commission to influence the work of the work group, and are in essence I'm trying to be as tactful and honest and polite as I can, because this is such a difficult topic for which I apologize. But I think the concern is that when work group members call upon the planning, some of the planning commissioners to opine and influence, some of the SWAC members to opine and interest to come before us and testify, it is those two entities, the potential for those two entities taking over the work group as it's designed and creating process resistance. That's the challenge. On the merits of the substance of the issues, Godspeed. That's where the liaison role is essential. But trying to impact what we do and don't do in the order, that's where the offline communication has been problematic. So
Okay.
It's not an either or, liaison or not. It's the quality and content and intent of the influence being asserted on the work group.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that we are good to leave the appointee role as it is, and I guess clarify, send a message that we don't want the outside communication and the back and forth, that we really just want the two-way between the liaison and our appointed body and then the work group. Is that fair, commissioners?
Yeah, and I would probably add that the focus should be on the work group. That's, we have limited staff, limited time, and a serious number of issues to go over, and I'm concerned about the distractions and kind of trying to change the direction of the work group midstream.
Okay.
And that's not acceptable.
I want to circle back to the fact that this bridge we're trying to build is one that is going, that we as a board felt was necessary, so that we had some minimum essential or minimum helpful information in the face of a potential conditional use permit application. It's not the bridge that's going to serve everyone in terms of the long-term discussion about the future of the landfill. So, but we as a board said we wanted this process and that we wanted this information. So trying to change the process dramatically midstream is only just going to keep us from getting anything done.
Agreed. Okay, so I think we can move on to question 2, which is what issues should be directed to the one table described in the work group charter, and what, if any, questions should be discussed at other tables during the work group process? Should the other issues be discussed while the work group is underway or postponed? So my opinion on what issues should be directed to the one table are topics and subtopics listed in the Benton County Talks Trash Charter and Bylaws document under 2, scope and charge, A through E. All subtopics in there. If other topics are discussed at other bodies. So just acknowledging there is a lot more related to solid waste in the landfill, et cetera, than what is in the BCTT charter. But if we have those discussions at the other tables, I don't feel like that is serving this process or our community well. I feel like it's putting the horse in front of the cart.
Chairwise, I would just like to interject real quick. There was a comment in chat requesting that your notes or the outline be shared. So I just wanted to make sure you did see that. If you choose to see that or share that, I think it's important that we state that it's your notes or your outline and doesn't represent the position of the board.
Correct. What do the other board members prefer if we screen share it, don't screen share it?
Post it to the chat, maybe. Can you just link it from your computer into the chat?
I don't know.
I
Can
don't
I?
know. Does Erica have a copy of it?
Yes.
We could also share it to that computer, which
Okay, I sent an email, so I sent it to
Yeah.
Erica, Joe, Sam, Darren, lots of people.
Or Joe, could you share directly from your screen?
I appreciate being able to see people when we're talking rather than seeing the document. So that's why my preference was to
Can
make
I
it available.
screen share
Do you
it?
need me to- do you have the document? It's,
I mean, can I screen share it from my computer?
I believe you can if that's.
Commissioner, if you wanted us to take a break for us to post it or what have you, we can certainly do that. Up to you. I just wanted to acknowledge that there was this outstanding question. in the
Yes,
chat.
thank you. All right, hey, look, that looks like it's working.
Thanks, Jeff.
So we are on question number 2. I know this looks long, but a lot of it is just quotes from bylaws and stuff like that. Okay. Question number 2, what issue should be directed to the one table? Commissioners' thoughts? Go ahead, Commissioner Malone.
The 5 charge elements, A through E, like you mentioned previously.
Okay.
I mean, that's, as I mentioned, that seems like plenty to deal with, especially with already at least 25% through the process, and the need to focus on the original charge elements, and I try to keep the side conversations and other topics to a minimum.
Okay, Commissioner Ojo.
I feel that given the preponderance of interest in the scoping of a long-term sustainable materials management plan process and the need that I feel to focus on the common understandings and the discussion about criteria and information requirements for the land use process, that items D and E are less important. And I think that came out in the ranking that the work group did. That's the additional topics, the hauling franchise preparation and the education campaign. So I think the group has already acknowledged that the first 3 items on the list are the top priority.
Okay.
In that context, I wanted to say what I had said again, or what I said before, and that is that the big discussion about the future of the landfill will happen in the context of the sustainable materials management plan development. And that larger discussion we'll have this winter. But the way that table of contents is written by this group is going to inform that greatly. So, just by virtue of the questions that are being asked, what that table of contents looks like, that's going to shape the direction we go. So, and the other thing I think that has been raised by a couple of people, but notably by Marge Pop, is our sustainable, our thriving communities 2040 process, and that we need to keep our own county values in mind as we put together that table of contents, and that will also frame how we move forward.
Thank you. And I'll just note that Sam put a message in the chat saying the size/capacity/longevity subcommittee was discussed at the last meeting after Paul's public comment presentation. The other subcommittees appear on the agenda for Thursday. Thank you, Sam. So I guess getting back to the question, what should be on the one table? So I've said A through E, Pat said A through E, you have said
A through C is definitely the priority.
Okay.
And so I'm feeling the work group's comment that this is very fast and very hard.
Sure.
And taking a lot of their time.
Okay. I would like to just, clarify, and I think there's a section down below that I've called this out. It's important for us to make the distinction between when individual members are giving us feedback and versus when the whole work group is giving us formal feedback. So I just want to make sure that we're being careful that if a couple people have said it's too much work, that's a great question for us to ask the work group as a whole. And I will just say, I feel like C and D are both very important for D and E. The public outreach part, to me, I don't know, that just, but I see what you're saying, though.
I'm not
So,
saying it's not important. I just
Okay.
don't know that it's part of the essential part of the bridge that we need right now.
Okay, so
It's the
separating,
urgency versus importance kind of conversation.
okay, so should we say that anybody at other planning commission can talk about D and E? Or can we say that nobody talks about it because it's still the one table? Whether or not the work group gets to it or not.
I think I would be okay with that, but I think that we need to also ask Sam and Darren about that, and just in terms of mechanics.
Yes, please. Sam and Darren.
I think we should ask Sam
Sam.
about that. Thanks.
So there's a nuance here that I want to make sure gets raised and for your direction. The table, well, for shorthand, we're calling it sort of the table of contents view for scoping the next solid waste management plan, or SMMP. The nuance here is, it's one thing to say, here are all the topics we recommend that as part of your RFP and part of the planning and work plan for the next process be considered. I think everyone agrees that that should be done. That's not the tension point. The tension point is, I believe, based on conversations with members, that there's a desire to dive deeper and actually make substantive recommendations on the outcomes of those topics. So, for instance, do you just put in the outline, what is our mission? What are our values? You have that, those are the questions to be asked. Or do you go one step further and say, our mission, our values should be A, consistent with Vision 2040. B, should reduce the amount of waste, these three ways. And of the three ways that it should be reduced, we prefer number two. It's the desire to go below the outline and start completing those issues where the tension point is.
Sure. So I just want to clarify that I am aware that there are lots of tensions and there's a lot going on with this group. So my questions here are really to build a framework to help sort out how we can give guidance to give an opportunity for that behavior to change.
So
my question really is, what's on the one table? I just want to be, I want the commissioners to be really clear what's on the one table. Is it A through E or is it something different?
For me, it's A through E, but C does imply to me going just a little bit further in terms of that next level down and scoping what that sustainable materials management plan is. I think it makes sense to state what the community's values are when we approach that endeavor.
Okay.
So I don't agree going down to the next level of here are the three alternatives and we choose and the group prefers that one. That's going too far. But I do think that addressing that landfill issue as part of a sustainable materials management plan and put the feel, the sense of the community is about direction is important.
Where is that conversation happening?
At the one table.
Perfect. I think we have an agreement there.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we,
I
sorry,
would-
Pat, go ahead.
I would slippery slope. The table of contents idea, get the outline, get the topics. There's already been comments about, well, there's too much work, and Commissioner Ojero mentioned, well, maybe A through C is where we should stop. I think I would prefer to get all 5 charge elements at least started the discussion, or some maybe didn't quite go in as much depth as would have liked, but I think we have to be careful with C that it is kind of a index table of contents. Here are the subjects that need to be covered in the next discussion. I hear about too much material and then, well, no, but we want to do extra here. Well, to me, that seems like a contradiction. Let's make sure this process is moving forward, and the county has invested a lot of time and money. I want a product at the end that the board here can use as guidelines, figure out what the next steps are as far as the discussion, but to come out with a usable product, usable information at the end of this process.
I think that there's more agreement than you indicate in your statement. I said that the first 3 should be the priority, and not that we necessarily should truncate the process at only the first 3 tasks. And I wanted to indicate also that this process is to try to build a consensus about the facts of the situation in these 5 issue areas, but we are all humans and we all have values. So we can't keep the values out of it. And that's part of what I see as, the group wanting to do when it comes to item C, is to express their values. So I think we need to allow room for that. But we have to get the work product done at the same time.
And I completely agree with that. So I have a question for my fellow commissioners. Are we interested in answering the questions today that were in the staff report? This is taking a lot longer than I had anticipated. My preference would be to kind of try to get through the questions, answer them, and then at the end, any higher level clarification stuff, I think would be great at that point. So what are your thoughts?
I'm fine with that.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, great. So question number 3, what are the mandatory responsibilities and basic rule requirements of the Planning Commission, of SWAC, of DSAC? So I'm not going to read all of these, but just for my own understanding, I read all of the bylaws, all of the code on this. I looked up ORS, and just to kind of get it straight, because they do overlap in their roles on occasion, and it can be confusing to keep it all straight. Let's see. I did have a question about, so the Planning Commission is also our Community for Citizen Involvement Board. And I just had a question on how that function is. Do they hold separate meetings as the CCI, or is it just, that's what they do?
It's all, those 3 responsibilities are rolled into one planning commission function.
Okay. I don't remember ever doing that when I was a planning commissioner, so just wanted to clarify. So just scrolling through here, the roles of the Planning Commission in ORS and in our own bylaws and code is very brief and open, which I understand is on purpose to give counties the ability to do the work as they see fit. And I believe the land development code is what goes into further detail about things, what actions or activities rise to the planning commission level. Is that correct? Thank you. SWAC, Solid Waste Advisory Council. So we mentioned a little bit on the first question about the issue of the liaison role maybe complicating things a little bit, and the question of should we continue to have these boards meet in the interim? So that's a question I have. Should we pause the meetings for a month or two until that draft document is ready, or should they continue to meet?
I think I would defer to staff on your ideal calendar going forward.
Sure. And before I ask staff, Commissioner Ojo, do you have a thought on that?
I already expressed my feelings that it's, I think that especially for the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, it makes more sense to let the one table do its work because this is their bread and butter, all of the issues being discussed at the one table. And that would allow staff to focus fully on that rather than trying to split efforts. But I say that with a heavy heart because I believe firmly in our advisory boards and committees, and I don't like to take away work from those groups.
Sure. And from my understanding, the Board of Commissioners does have the authority to cancel a meeting or a work session. The chair of the appointed body does have the ability through the bylaws to call meetings, but the board does have the authority to cancel said meetings. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. And staff, I'm sorry, would you like to say something?
If you would like me to say something.
I think Commissioner Malone had a question. Did you?
Yeah.
Okay,
Go ahead.
sorry. Or no, I think he asked you a question. I just think I talked and maybe it got forgotten.
Would you, Commissioner Malone, would you please restate the question?
Just from staff point of view, there's a question of the calendar and maybe postponing other committee meetings so we can concentrate on the work group. And what would that look like?
Well, recognizing that the key staff to the Solid Waste Advisory Council is not here today, I'll speak for the Planning Commission and on behalf of Daniel Reddick. There are two really important functions, I think, at play here. One is the liaison role between the appointed work group members from SWAC and the Planning Commission back to their appointed bodies. And I think that conversation, that two-way conversation that Commissioner Ojo mentioned a minute ago is very important to maintain. There is also, I think, a temptation to want to opine at those separate tables about the process, about the content, and that's where the one table, in my mind, begins to kind of fracture, because now as staff, we're trying to support and keep up with multiple substantive conversations. So if I was going to ask the board to do something today, I think what I would like for you to do is to make clear that if SWAC, DSAC, and the Planning Commission meet between now and the time that the work group is finished, that those meetings focus on two tasks. One is the liaison role, just keeping the communication open between the appointed members and the bodies. And then secondly, when Benton County Talks Trash Work Group has product for review, we would encourage and welcome very much a robust discussion at those tables about the work group's product, but not until the work group has product ready for those bodies to review.
I appreciate that because the calendar does come into play, and we have the schedule for the work group, and I know I appreciate that clarification that it's not well, you have to wait till the work group gets over before you start back up. no, but let the work group get through the next month or something like that and get closer to having something substantive to talk about, and then involve the other committees.
Yes.
So that to me, that seems like how we should proceed and a good plan.
So, and one other note, so by our bylaws and by ORS, I think DSAC is required to meet quarterly and have an annual report. Have those conditions been met?
Yes, they have. I took a look. I didn't look at the specific agendas, but I looked at our schedule. It looks like DSAC has met officially 5 times this calendar year, and it completed its annual report on July 20th.
Okay, so if we were to postpone those meetings, we would not be running afoul of our own bylaws or Oregon state statute. Okay, very good. So did I hear, oh, excuse me.
Can I just ask Darren one
Yes.
question? Darren, does the planning commission have any hearings coming up on applications between now and the end of the year, which will require them to meet?
Yes, the planning commission is in the midst of a legislative hearing process for the Adair Village UGB. So it will meet October 11th, and then likely we'll meet one more time for extended deliberation, if I had to guess today. We also expect 1 and maybe 2 appeals of prior decisions. So I don't have that schedule in front of me at the moment, but I do anticipate that the planning commission will need to meet and make some decisions before.
I think that's letting us know that we're running way over time. So I'm going to try my best to just kind of skate through just pick up the high level stuff here.
Okay.
Does the Board of Commissioners wish to pause SWAC and DSAC meetings until they have a draft document to review?
I did see there was comment in the chat about
So
DSAC work, but
yeah, I just want to say that any comments in the chat from now on will be read after the meeting, because I feel like it's the same as sitting in the audience and yelling it out. So
it's challenging,
Yeah.
especially since we're not all online.
Yeah.
I only see the first few words of each comment.
okay,
I think
go ahead. Sorry.
It makes sense to, as Darren was proposing, to keep the liaison role, but not necessarily to have monthly meetings as is the typical rhythm for SWAC, but perhaps to wait until there's work product to share.
Okay, I agree. Do we need a motion for that?
I think it would be prudent, yes.
All right, do I hear a motion? Or I can make one?
Go ahead.
I move that the Board of Commissioners cancels SWAC and DSAC meetings until a draft document comes from the Benton County Tox Trash Work Group for their reviewing. For their review.
Would like to make a point of clarification. So you're suggesting that that SWAC and DSAC wouldn't meet until that there's a draft of the entire volume of work done? Or that they can.
How about I
at an interim
amend
point.
my motion to say when the work group deems it necessary to get their feedback? Is that helpful? Is that not helpful?
When there's a substantial draft.
Yeah, that sounds.
So would at that point where there's a substantial draft of the body of work for the Benton County Tox Trash Work Group, it makes sense to establish a SWAC meeting so the liaison can get input.
So is it fair to say that the motion, Commissioner Wise, has been amended to cancel DSAC SWAC meetings until there's a substantial document or information for those two bodies to review on behalf of the work group?
Yes, thank you very much.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right,
Motion carries. Okay.
Erica, How did you do this?
She's great. I'm sure she's got it.
Sorry, let me just read back part of that. Substantial documented information for those two bodies to, what was the next?
Review.
Review. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'm just going to skip right through some of this. Question 4, expectations for the appointed body. I think we have addressed that. We expect them to, have the one table conversations, A through E. Planning Commission, it sounds like still needs to meet. What steps would the board like to take in situations where roles are not filled and or expectations? Or I don't think that's supposed to say entities, items maybe identified in the charter are not met. My 2 cents is in situations where a work group member cannot or will not meet expectations as determined by the Board of Commissioners, the Board of Commissioners will remove the member from the work group. In addition, if a situation arises where the work group member is from a Benton County organization / interest group, Board of Commissioners will consider removing the individual from the county board / committee / commission / council. And again, this is just my opinion as one commissioner. There it is. Thoughts from my fellow commissioners?
I assume that's in our rules. We appointed board members and we have the authority to remove members. So I'm not sure that's anything new. It doesn't hurt to state it, but.
Correct. I just want to provide clear direction to any of our appointed committee members.
And that's true of any committee.
Correct.
I mean, we're not just talking about the current setup. That's the overall situation.
Yes.
I concur. Personally, I think it's I really dislike the notion of removing anyone from the working group because they were selected for a reason. But we need to be really clear about the fact that we have a charter, we have tasks, we have limited time. And at this point, if we keep talking about process endlessly, then we're never going to get anything done. So I think that what I would like to clarify is that the primary reason that I would look at removing anyone from the table would be if they just simply cannot stand by the charter that was already in place when they were selected.
Agreed. Yep. And I, of course, do not want to remove anyone. But I think the basis for this whole conversation has been, some things occurring that we have been less than happy with. And we are just giving everyone the opportunity to get on the same page. We are setting the message that, yes, we do want you to work on the scope and the charge. If you cannot or will not, the Board of Commissioners will have to go through with, as it's laid out in Chapter 3, Citizen Committees, Rules, Grounds, Procedures.
And I appreciate Commissioner Rose's comment about the sequence. It was about 9:30 last night when I reviewed that, and the charter and the tasks were developed in the summer. I think a fair amount of community input, several drafts, and so the task at hand was in place before board members were appointed. So, and I think that's an important point. Here's the task, and we would like your help achieving our goals.
And I would like to note too, in the Benton County Talks Trash Workgroup Charter and Bylaws under 8 Facilitator, it does say the Board of Commissioners gives broad authority to the facilitator to interpret this document and guide the work group accordingly. The facilitator will address situations where it appears a participant is not acting according to the document. So, and I acknowledge that. Any other points on this before we, nope, okay, then we can move on.
Want to acknowledge Margaret?
So Sam's questions, to what extent, if any, does the board want to add, remove, or edit the following charge elements? Section A, common understandings, I said no changes, so I think the board has agreed on A, B, and C. And D and E, maybe we heard some concerns that we might not have time to fully address them. But at this point, the board does not wish to make any changes to them. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So to what extent does the board want to add, remove, or edit the following charge elements? And the answer is we do not. To what extent, if any, do you want the work group to make a recommendation on A, whether and or when the landfill should be closed, B, reducing the amount of waste that goes into landfill, and C, options for the county's solid waste future? They're all very important topics to consider.
I think that this goes back to that discussion about topic C, and whether to broaden it out or not. Given that we are going to continue to engage on that topic explicitly after this bridge process is over, I don't think we need to open it up to those specific questions, but I do think that we should frame the scoping for the sustainable material management plan with our county values in mind, and use that framework to shape how we would approach that planning process.
Yes, and I'm interested in a planning process that goes about this in the best way possible, building a good foundation and then leading it to the other work topics. And I know it's not always that easy because there's overlap and entanglement, but that is my 2 cents. Commissioner Malone.
I think that's how we should proceed. We have a pretty substantial body of work that needs to get done, and I've used the word focus before, and this group needs to do that. The word facts have been used a couple times, and that's what I'm interested in at the end of the process, that we will, the board will have good solid information to continue this process. But there are, and I've been involved with this for several years, and different numbers floating around as far as lifespan of the facility, and in order to make good decisions, we need good solid information, and that's what I'm depending on you to give us at the into this process.
Okay, so that we have clear direction. So to what extent do we want the work group to make recommendations on those 3 things, if any? Sam, do you have any input here?
I think it's all been shared and discussed.
Okay, so getting to skip around a little bit, your last question is are any of the commissioners available to come to the October 8th meeting to hear from the work group? And then sort of my tentative plan was to also convey the expectations from the board on roles and responsibilities to the work group. So as long as that is okay with my fellow commissioners, as chair, I'm happy to do that. So if I am going to address the board, I would like to be able to answer this question in a way that makes sense.
I think that what I was saying is that those are clearly questions that are very much on the mind of the community. These are not going to be the final answers on these matters. There's going to be more time to address those questions in greater depth when we really dive into the sustainable materials management plan overall. So I don't think these questions need to be answered now.
Sure. So I think the keyword is a recommendation. Are we wanting the Benton County Tax Trash to make recommendations to us on whether the landfill's closed?
No.
How to reduce it? No. Okay.
No.
Okay. My
And-
answer is no as well.
But I just want to go back to the fact that those questions are very much questions of values. And I do think that the group should have an opportunity to express their values, you know, and whatever that looks like, whether it's, you know, just a value statement overall, but not getting into these specifics.
Okay. Last question from Sam. There was a question if a community member could be added to the agenda, and does the board support that? My initial thought, based on my own personal experience and opinions about parliamentary procedure and running efficient meetings, was that individuals are welcome to comment during the public comment period and or submit their comments in writing to the group, unless the work group as a whole wants to make that request. And this also gets back to, I just want to clarify that my expectation is, and is it the board's expectation, that any communication from the work group is, we're not having an individual person or 2 or 3 people come to us and say, this is what the work group is saying. If it's a message from the work group, it needs to be made at the work group by the body by a majority vote. Is that fair?
I think that's
Yes.
fair.
Okay. That is, consider that clarified. Any other clarifications that I have missed, Darren or Sam? And then after that, commissioners, you can say your final piece.
Oh, I appreciate you taking time to work through these questions and asking them. Sam?
Same, thank you.
All right. Any further thoughts?
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
I guess I'd like to point out that Benton County hired Sam Imperati as our, I don't know if facilitator is the right word, a third party to guide this process. And I've heard at least a modest amount of criticism on Sam's role. And I want to be clear, I support Sam in his efforts to guide this process forward. I think early on, Republic Services offered to pay a share of the expenses for the effort, and we turned the money down. We wanted this to be a Benton County effort that we had control over, and no extraneous partners. That this is our process. We've hired Sam. I think he's been on board 6 months. Is that?
Yeah, roughly.
Something like that. So, I mean, I know it was a 2-part process. He did the first part and we were impressed, and we hired him to continue. And I just want to make it clear, I have confidence in his efforts, and I think I'll stop there.
Perfect. Commissioner Ojo?
I just wanted to acknowledge the fact that we haven't had a community-wide conversation on solid waste issues in Benton County for decades, dating back to the 80s and 70s and 80s. And it's way overdue. And that's part of the reason we've got so much frustration in the room, because there hasn't been an opportunity for community members to really engage on the topic. That said, this constrained process is not going to be it's not going to allow us the opportunity to get all of that done. We have to defer some of that work until after this bridge process is over. But we, as the Board of Commissioners, asked for this bridge information. It's important to us. It may not seem like the be all and end all information to community members, but it's kind of a minimum set of information that we want to have if we end up sitting in our quasi-judicial role to review another conditional use permit. So please help us and respect what we need to have before us so that we have a balanced set of information and some common understandings that are more or less agreed to by community members about what reality is as we make our decisions moving forward. And then we'll charge into the future to chart our sustainable materials management plan, which I think we're all really, really eager to get into.
All right, very good. And I agree with those sentiments. I will just clarify quickly. So as the chair of the Board of Commissioners, I will attend the next Talks Trash work group meeting. The message that I will send to clarify is, yes, we are keeping the liaison roles, but we are sending a message that the conversations really need to be held to the intent of the back and forth and one table and not multiple conversations all over the place. And I will think of a nice way to say that. And then we have also canceled until further notice the SWAC and DSAC meetings. If a work group member cannot meet expectations, they can be removed from the board. What extent do we want to edit charge elements? None. And to what extent do we want recommendations on question 8, A, B, and C? None. And I think that is it. Thank you very much, everybody. And I am very thankful for all of the work group members and all of the community members that have put in their hard time. It is a lot of work. Sam, did I see your hand? Nope. Okay. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful afternoon. And with that, I will apologize that we are so far behind. And as the chair and as the person who submitted this document, I will take responsibility for that. So my apologies. We do have a public hearing at 11 a.m. We do need to take a break. And I know we still have supplemental budget, code amendments. We have all these very fine people in the back of the room waiting patiently. My sincerest apologies to all of you. So I'm going to take a 6-minute break and we will come back at 11 a.m. for our public hearing. All right, we are all back. And it is 11:02. We will proceed with our public hearing in the matter of a public hearing to consider protest of contract award for geotechnical services. With us, we have our Public Works Director, Gary Stockoff. Let's see, Tuesday, October 4th, 2022 at 11 a.m. is the time set for the bid protest of the geotechnical contract award. The hearing procedure will be as follows. 1, staff will present the facts of the bid evaluation process. 2, protester will present its argument. 3, staff response. Following the testimony, the record will be closed and the board will deliberate and make a decision. If you have documents or other evidence that you wish to have considered by this body, they must be formally placed in the record of this proceeding. To do that either before or after you speak, please leave the material with Erica Milo, who will make sure your evidence is properly taken care of. If you are testifying online, please send an email to Erica. All right, so I will open the public hearing. Gary, you're up.
Good morning, Commissioners. This is an item that is related to the courthouse DA project. And we solicited for proposals for geotechnical services. That was done latter part of, I think, July with proposals due in the middle of August. We received 7 proposals, which was actually a great number. And then 3 individuals independently reviewed those in accordance with the criteria that is in ORS 279. And scores were provided and those scores were averaged. The average scores for all the firms are included in an exhibit that exhibit 2 that I think is attached to your staff report.
Yep.
And we then recommended that that contract be awarded to NV5 because of their ranking in the process. And subsequent to that, though, we are required to send out a notice of intent to award for anybody that has concern with that. And Foundation Engineers Incorporated did submit a protest in the prescribed time frame. And then the resolution of that is staff prepared and our consultant and Vance prepared a response that is also attached that went through the ORS sections and outlined, the issues that Foundation had raised, and that, we basically said how we followed the process and that the scores were fair and independent and were appropriate. And then I met with Jim and we discussed that. And then they went ahead about a week later and decided to go ahead with the protest. The protest option, as Vance can point out or clarify, is that it goes from there right to the public hearing today for the board to then decide the outcome of the resolution for that protest. So again, staff recommends or finds that we have met the letter and intent of the ORS sections when we did the review of the RFP, and that we are recommending that NV5 receive that award and that the protest not be upheld. And so with that, I can answer any questions. And I apologize, there is a lot of stuff attached to the report, but in case you needed the background with the RFP or anything else, hopefully it's in there. Jim is here and he has, I think, some information and some facts that he would want to share with you about this situation, and we can go there if you have any questions right now.
Sure, and I would just say, don't apologize for giving us all the needed information. We appreciate it. Commissioner Malone.
Gary, the score sheets on page 168 of our packet. You mentioned independent evaluation, or who evaluated the proposal?
There was myself and there were 2 people from OTAC that looked those over. And then what we've done with OTAC especially, and as we go through with JSIP, everybody scores, they'll send those scores off to OTAC, they gather them together, average them, and then produce the form like you saw here to keep it fair. And, I think one of the things that was talked about was bias, to remove the bias, just here's the numbers, here's the average. And, I think one thing to consider is as everybody goes through and looks at these, Some may rate a little higher, some may rate a little lower, some may rate, right in the middle. But as long as that person rates high all the time or low all the time, they're consistent in their application of the scores. What we get at the end is that average score that then is very indicative of who and how the firms are ranked. And I know we've been through that process with some of the CMGC that we went through recently and architects that we selected. So it's a good system, and obviously it follows the ORS, and that's why we're comfortable recommending that we proceed on as the group decided.
Okay, thank you.
Do you know how many applicants or companies that applied were local versus not local?
Well, clearly Foundation is local. I mean, they're right here. None of the other ones are here. They may have an office somewhere close, but not physically within Corvallis to the extent that Foundation does. They are, and we do other work with Foundation.
Okay, so they were the one local choice. Is that correct?
They were right here. Yep.
Okay, thank you. Other comments or questions? No. All right, thank you. Or do we have any comments or questions from county council or county administrator?
I have one comment. The document you see beginning on page 154 and then rolling all the way through the list of projects on page 167 was the protest document that was submitted after the bid was awarded. The list of projects was not included within the proposal. So I just want to clarify.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. All right, thank you, Gary. And now we will have the protester present their argument. Welcome. Thank you for coming today. If you wouldn't mind stating your name.
My name is Jim Maitland, and I'm representing Foundation Engineering. I have some handouts that I'll give so you can follow my points.
Okay.
Do I hand them individually to you, or how do I do this?
I'd like a copy.
Yeah, you can approach the whatever this is, dais. Thank you.
Here, I can hand it out if you'd like.
I'm hoping this will help track my points here. First of all, I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I'm cognizant of the value of your time, so I'll try to be as short as possible and to the point. I don't plan on relitigating the entire SOQ. I'm going to focus on two items of the SOQ, and I'm here because I believe that the methodology used to award the points in terms of scoring and the ranking did not follow the criteria set forth in the RFP. And I hope that these points, I'll try to make those succinctly. As background, just very briefly, I came to Corvallis in 1974. I got my doctorate at OSU in civil engineering in 77. In 1978, I co-founded a consulting firm. And then in 1982, I founded Foundation Engineering. And we have been here since 1982. In fact, this weekend, we're having our 40th celebration, 40th anniversary. I have been a practicing geotechnical engineer full-time since 1977 in this area. So let me focus first on one of the main criteria asked for in the RFP. It's stated, please describe your local experience. Now, my take on local, the word local, if I use it in the context of a local election or a local business, means local. It means Corvallis, Benton County. I don't take it to mean Eugene, Roseburg, or the Oregon coast, Portland. So our response was focused on that word local. If you look in the if you look at, there's two columns. There's the blue column and the red column. The blue column is what was taken from NV5. You have, I believe, all those documents already there. Basically, they listed under the category of local. They listed 9 projects. If you flip over to our side, and I think you have a copy of that. If you do not, I brought them with me. I did not include I did not include this because it is 9 pages long. So I did not, for the sake of brevity, include it in an SOQ because they asked for brevity. But we have 409 projects. That actually, the number is a little higher because since we've submitted this, we've been working on a number of other projects, but 409 is what we submitted. And I have the documentation to that if you want that, or you should have that. In fact, if you imagine turning right off of off of 9th onto Circle, go across the railroad tracks. If you imagine all the buildings that go from there east towards your courthouse site, just about every one of those buildings we worked on. And I listed 12 examples. I did this actually from memory, but those are 12 examples of projects that we have worked on. Those are all located within a few thousand feet of your project site. So that's not just local, it's nearby. And each of those projects in the work we do involve test pits, borings, soil tests, analysis, information that can help us inform us in terms of your courthouse site. So we have just east of the railroad tracks, we have more experience local and nearby than NV5 has in the entire county. Furthermore, if you want to come closer to home, if you imagine Research Way right here, with the exception of, I believe, if memory, I'm going by memory, if memory serves me right, except for the Forest Service building over there, we have done the foundation investigations for essentially all the buildings along here, ranging from the school down that end to the OSU Credit Union and the what I call the NIPRO building. If you go across the street, Technology Loop, we did the work on that shopping center. I'm trying to show you the local experience we have. If you go over to OSU campus, the Research Stadium, both phases of expansion, the OSU Arts Performance Building is going under construction now right near the railroad tracks. All the recent buildings that have gone up, from the Energy Center to the Forestry Building, the Linus Pauling classroom building, all the major structures in the last 20 years we have worked on. So that gives you a flavor of that. The category of local was given 25 points. We were awarded 24. NV5 was awarded 21. Now I submit, and one of the reasons I'm here is that if you do just the math, 9 projects represent around 2% of our work experience locally. And yet they're awarded 21 points versus 24 for us. Only, you can do the math, 3 points separating us. And only 4 points separated us in the grand total of everything. One other point. The second part of that category said, describe your work experience working directly for the city and for the county. Now you can look under their SOQ, but I try to paraphrase here. Under the second row, it says they did not work much with the city and none with the county. Now, I'll draw your attention to the right side of the column. We have been working here for 40 years in this county. We have worked on bridges, roads, landslides, water tanks, sewer lines, you name it. In fact, in the last 6 months, we have worked on 3 projects directly for the county. We've worked on the event center for the fairgrounds. I worked on the evaluation of the reservoir site, which you call the West Campus site, which is the alternative one for the courthouse. And we just finished last week, in fact, a preliminary evaluation of a slide on Fern Road. So they produced, in their own words, they have no experience working directly with the county. In the last few months, we can cite 3 projects. If you go through this list over here, you'll find example after example of bridges and so forth. So you're asking for local experience, 9 versus 409. Direct experience with the city and the county, none for the county. And we have essentially decades of experience working with you folks. And we're currently on your list of have a contract for on-call services for the county. I'd submit that disparate experience is not reflected in the scoring of that particular category. Let me make one more point. If you go furthermore and go through with a fine tooth comb the submittal of the two proposals, NV5 and ours. They asked to submit a design team and submit resumes for the key people. If you go through the entire design team NV5 submitted, we were able to find one reference to one project in Corvallis. There's a private housing development, I believe in downtown, it's called the Union. One project. When they highlight their experience, if you go to the page, I think it's page 5 on their experience, you'll find that pretty much every single project that's listed as their relevant experience, almost the majority of them are in the Portland area. Now, they listed originally 9 projects locally, but only one shows up on their resume or in their highlighted experience. I don't know why. I can only speculate. By contrast, when we submitted our design team, I had to balance between local experience and the relevant experience. By relevant, I mean, we have done courthouses, civic stadiums, police stations, basically city halls throughout Oregon. So we had to balance that relevant experience to which similar to your courthouse project, along with our local experience. If you look through all our resumes, you'll find that we listed 19 local projects in our resumes. When we gave examples, and the examples, I won't go through them all, but the examples, look in our submittal, there are an additional 25 local projects of which we highlighted. Some of them working directly for the city or the county, but they're local projects. That sum total is 44 local projects listed between your design team and your highlighted projects. Again, I submit 1 versus 44 is not reflected in the scoring of 21 and 23 and 24 points. Now, let me change focus for one quick second. The other category that was asked for is describe what makes your firm unique. That was awarded 10 points. NV5 was awarded 10 points. We were awarded 2 points. Now, the word unique, excuse me just a second. The word unique was not defined, so it's a little subjective. They listed, and I'll again paraphrase here, that they listen, they work harder than anyone else, and they hire summer interns. That's in a nutshell their focus, for which they're awarded 10 points. Foundation engineering was awarded 2 points for that category. I wrote the SOQ, so in my mind, I thought, what is unique about foundation engineering with respect to the delivery of engineering service to the county? I would submit that not only foundation engineering, but all the other consultants that submitted, they also listen to their clients and they work hard, or we wouldn't be in business for decades. Now, as for hiring interns, I think that's laudable. I don't see the relevance to it in terms of delivery of engineering services. But to contrast that, foundation engineering, we also hire interns during the summer. In fact, our president, Bill Nichols, he is involved in the capstone program in the civil engineering program. I have lectured on campus. In fact, I've taught 2 engineering classes on campus. I did not mention it because I don't see that as relevant to it. Instead, what I thought, what is relevant that makes us unique, that separates us from the other consultants? Number 1, we're providing you or offering you a design team of all of them are either professional engineers, PE, or geotechnical engineers, which means they're PE and a CE and a GE, or they're a CEG, which means certified engineering geologist. Our team has decades of work experience locally, decades of experience working with the county, and we have relevant project experience working on city halls and police stations and jails and courthouses. And in addition to that, we're located 5 minutes away. No, I know that for a fact because I literally, a few days ago, I timed myself. I drove from your site to my office. I got stuck in two lights on Circle, but I made it in exactly 5 minutes from my office. Now, why is that relevant? Why is that unique? For the last 2 summers, we've been providing construction support services to all the schools that are going on around. You see all the work. And it's not unusual for us to get a call at 7 or 7:30 in the morning, on Monday morning. It happened, in fact, this morning, but on Monday we're saying, we forgot to call you, but we have a contractor waiting. They got trucks, they got an excavator. We need you out here to take a look at something. It's an unexpected condition, or they want to dig some footings, whatever the situation is. We have responded to those school jobs within 5 to 10 minutes. Now, over the last summer, I literally have made dozens of trips to Wilsonville, where NV5 or Geodesign, which is the firm they acquired, is located. My daughter just completed school up there, so I made that trip up dozens of times. And I can attest that it takes me an hour and 15 minutes minimum to drive from here to there. And that's assuming clear sailing on I-5. If you get stuck in a traffic jam, then all bets are off. So one of the unique qualities of us is that our response time is literally can be 5 minutes as opposed to an hour and 15 minutes or more. Now, why is that important? Well, let me give you an example. It's very common for us to get a call in the morning to say, come out and look at this footing excavations. And they'll work for 3 or 4 hours. At the end of the day, we get a call, we're ready to backfill your excavations. We need you out here right now to prove them so we can start backfilling. We'll go out there. So we can respond in the morning, in the afternoon. We're off your payroll. We have other work to do in between. So our response time is a fraction of anyone from, the submittals came from Roseburg and mostly from the Portland area. The other issue is we do not charge for travel time. We do not charge for mileage. We're located literally blocks away from your site. You know, I did a quick calculation. If you take an average cost for an engineer and multiply by 2.5 hours of travel time, add ODOT's standard rate for mileage, I estimate you're going to be paying in the range of about $400, $450 extra per trip. Now, that doesn't sound like very much, but imagine, for example, that for illustration purposes, you're going to make 5 trips to the site for meetings to coordinate your exploration, for doing your drilling, or digging test pits. And during construction, you make a couple of dozen to 3 dozen trips, which is typical for what we've been doing for the schools, for instance. If you just take the lower number, say a couple of dozen trips during construction, and 5 trips or 6 trips during design phase, you're looking around 30 trips. And if you do the math, 30 times that number, you're looking at $12,000, $13,000 premium to shuttle someone up and down the I-5 corridor. Now, in the RFP, they stated that there's a possibility or a probability that this contract will be expanded for 5 years to cover other buildings that are planned at that site. So I don't think I need to do the math that if you have that kind of a premium for people working from out of town to come in here, I think you can do the math of 5-year premium, give it cost then. I think I can do. Okay, I'm wrapping up.
Sure, another 2 minutes or 5 minutes?
2 minutes,
What do you need?
I'll
2
make it
minutes?
60 seconds.
Okay, perfect.
So to make a long story short, our point is that the huge disparate numbers between our local experience and the uniqueness of foundation engineering is not reflected in the scoring that were awarded for those 2 categories. I'll end by saying we value the long-term relationship we've had working for the county and our current relationship, and that will not change regardless of your decision today. And with that, I'll open up for questions if you want.
Thank you very much. Comments or questions? I know first I'll just say thank you for clarifying your definition of local because I was going to ask that. So other comments or questions?
I'd like to hear Gary's rebuttal. Yeah.
I was wondering.
Okay.
I think I will point out maybe one critical thing here, or key thing, and that is the protest received from Foundation, and I'll read it directly. For the sake of brevity, we have selected only one RFP category to illustrate our assertion, and that is the local experience. So the other segments, the other components really weren't evaluated. And as we look at the totality of the categories, again, because there were 6 categories, the idea of any RFP is that we have a number of categories so that you can get a depth and breadth of the firm's experience. We're not questioning their experience. I mean, we're not. But to make this a fair and transparent process, the RFP, we expanded those. Those were evaluated by 3 different people, and the scores were averaged. And they were judged in one category as being a little deficient. So, but that category was not part of their protest. It was only the local experience. So even if they received the full 25 points, which I am not recommending we change the scores because of the process we went through, it was still fine that they were not the firm that had the most total points. And again, it's the totality of the RFP that we are addressing today. And I think what we have to remember is beauty is in the eye of the beholder, so to speak, and everybody rates differently. But at the end of the day, they add them up and they average them, and it's worked out really well for a long time. I think this is the first protest we've ever had. So following the process that we followed has worked. So
can I respond to that?
You could have 2 minutes.
Okay, I'll make less than that. If you focus only on the category of local experience, my point is, I'm not quibbling about whether we had 24, 25 points, but if you look at the difference between quote local experience or the lack thereof and the awarding of 21 points, my point is that does not reflect accurately what was submitted by NV5 relative to foundation engineering. And since only 4 points separated us from the total of all that, that if you were to award that proportionally to their actual experience, that category for them would be scored way lower than 21 points. And that's my point.
Okay. And just a clarifying question for Gary, they did receive 24 out of the 25 points and
No,
in
we
the
did.
local, yes, excuse-
Yeah.
yes, foundation engineering received 24 out of
Correct.
the 25 possible
Correct.
points, and they did receive the highest points out of that category for anyone that applied. Correct?
yes,
Okay.
yes. And just to be, though, the scores in that ranged from a low of 7 to the high of 24. So again,
So they did score very high in that category.
yeah,
Yes, perfect.
as,
Okay,
as
other-
would
that's the
seem
local.
logical, yeah,
Mhm.
because they are here and they have a great body of work.
Other questions or comments before we close the hearing and deliberate?
I guess I would just say I'm not comfortable hearing one side of the process. I have confidence that it was a fair.
Well, we're not- I don't think we're deliberating yet.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry. And this is a new experience for us because I don't think any of us have done a contract bid protest public hearing before.
Nope.
So and just to clarify, County Council, we do not have any public testimony because it
That is
is a
correct.
contract
That
bid
is correct.
protest. Okay. Okay, well, if there's no more clarifying questions, then I will close the record and then we will move into deliberations.
Can I ask one process question?
Okay, I'll reopen. Oh,
I'm
no,
sorry,
process
I'm
question, go ahead.
thinking, So the way our process is set up, because of the fact that Jim in his protest letter only addressed the local experience category and not the unique qualifications category, that's not relevant for this purposes of this?
That's my understanding, and
That's
it would-
correct. The protest must cite the basis for the protest and ideally point to elements within the proposals that they wish to base the protest upon.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. That was a good process question. Thank you. Okay, so
Thank
we'll
you.
move into deliberations. And I will say, so yes, as noted, that foundation engineering was awarded 24 out of the 25 points. However, that was not the only category. That's not the only reason why a firm was selected. The proposals were independently evaluated. No insight into the other evaluator scores. Scores were collected and averaged to create a final score. done with a fair and non-biased methodology, met the applicable ORS criteria. It was a qualifications-based selection, the RFP was. And the protester does have a point that trips and miles do add up. But in the context of this hearing, I have to find that the criteria was met by Benton County. Even though, yes, it would be nice if we could cut down on trips and miles, but that's not the only consideration that we have. Other deliberations.
Yeah, we're getting, the evaluation committee spent hours, spent hours going over materials and for us to get a one-sided presentation, I don't feel comfortable rejecting what your committee has come up with. I mean, I appreciate the thoughtful process and following the regulations, and so that's.
So is it fair to say that you concur with what the original
Yes.
committee, not that you're recusing yourself?
That is correct.
Short of redoing the entire ranking process ourselves instead of entrusting the public works process an approach to do so, I also support the process that was undertaken. I completely understand the unique qualification of being 5 minutes away from the site, and have worked on bridge projects and such where it's really important to have that expertise nearby. But given that that wasn't the basis of the protest, I can't in good conscience support overturning the decision, the selection that was made.
And I agree. And I know that Foundation Engineering does a great job. I've heard, and I've lived in this community for over 20 years, and I've just heard continually good things about them. And I appreciate that they are a local business, and that does contribute to our local economy and a livable, vibrant community. So I appreciate that. Is there a motion? Or would you like to say anything?
All I was going to say is that yes, this is the beginning of a hopefully larger project. And perhaps it would be worthwhile to reopen the contract after this phase. My 2 cents worth. I might not be in office at that point, so
by choice.
Yeah, by choice. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Do I hear a motion?
I'll move to reject the protest submitted by FE, and that the contract negotiations with the successful proposer commence.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you, everyone, for your time.
Thank you.
All right. Where are we on the agenda? We are back to 4.3. The supplemental budget 23041 with Jen Ambuel, Financial Services, and Rick Krager. And again, I apologize that you guys got pushed back so far. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Commissioner Wise, Chair Wise, members of the board. Yeah, it allowed us to get a little bit of extra work done here as well. So thank you for having us here today. I'm really going to turn this over to the star of the show. Jen has done an incredible job in terms, as always, putting our budget supplement together. I think the only thing I would say is kind of preface this.
you're going to see a lot of, it's very impressive to see how much activity we've had since the last budget supplement. Some of these things that you see are probably very familiar, has happened maybe some time back, but we're at that point now of actually getting this all put together. So again, I will turn it over to Jen and she will walk through this, and certainly we'll both be here for questions as you have more.
Well, good morning. I do see it's still morning and it's nice to see your faces actually in person since I haven't in about 2 years. I do need to make mention that I was going through my presentation last night and I do have a couple of corrections that I want to note. One would be on page 18 of your packet. There is a line that says operations under the general fund summary. And that amount should be $3,809,610. I can honestly admit I have no idea where that amount came from that I wrote in that particular line. And then following on page 19, the American Rescue Plan Fund Summary, the operations should be $9,079,937. I can tell you, I know what that one was. There is an item that is in the transfer that I also added into the operations, so I just removed those. I did review the resolution this morning and the general fund resolution portion was correct. The rescue plan was not. So I have made that change and sent to staff to be updated in the next packet when we move to public hearing.
I have one question about the resolution. The date on that is October 4th. Should it be dated October 18th?
Yes, ma'am, it should. So I will make that change and send it again. Thank you. That being said, we do have 9 funds in the 21-23 biennium that do need adjusting. I will take them by fund and pause after each fund for questions, so that way we don't get lost. The first one would be the general government operations in the general fund. There is a net increase of $1,709,335 in appropriations. This would cover the additional staff costs and contract services for the JSIP, the grant received by Records and Elections to purchase an envelope scanner and opener, and then also a portion of the JSIP land purchase that was not covered by ARPA funding. And that money will actually be reimbursed by courthouse dollars in the future. If you have any questions on that, that is definitely a Rick Krager question. And then just to note, in this, even though it is a net increase, I did decrease appropriations in the general fund under materials and services in the CARES and FEMA cost center to increase the transfer amount to the Calapooya Phase 2 remodel. And you will see that later on when we reach that fund. We also are asking to increase health operations, $2,069,461. As you can see, the funding sources for those are numerous. The first one would be House Bill 4123, Coordinated Homeless Response System Funds, which I believe is also on the agenda today. And so that will increase appropriations for staffing costs, supplies, and contracted services for HOPE. There is the OHA Mental Health Community Restoration Grant that covers staffing costs, contracts, and equipment purchases for behavioral health. And then the last 4 sources of revenue all go into health promotion, and that covers staffing costs, various supplies and services for that program. So that would be Measure 108, OHA TPEP funds, OHA ADPEP funds, Measure 110 Behavioral Resource Network funds, and then the opioid settlement funds is also housed there. Next would be justice services operations within the general fund. This is an increase of $30,814, and that would be additional grant funds received for VOCA. And this would increase the staffing costs and supply purchases per their grant agreement. Next, because we appropriate transfers separately, I am asking for an increase of $513,000. This would cover the transfer that you will see later to the Building Development Reserve Fund for the match portion on the EOC project. And that would be coming out of contingency in the general fund. And then the other piece I had mentioned earlier is I am increasing a transfer to Fund 514 for Phase 2 Calapooya that is coming from COVID lost wage reimbursements in the FEMA and CARES cost centers. Next, in the general fund, we do have a decrease in our reserves for future. This was something that was planned and known about, and that would be $1,227,700. And that is that portion of the JSIP land purchase that was not covered by ARPA. And then within contingency, there is a net decrease of $271,033. While I am increasing appropriation for some reimbursement of costs for county courthouse expenditures in the prior biennium, it is being offset by decreasing the appropriation for the EOC matching funds and the additional JSIP costs.
And Madam Chair, if I might just add real quickly, before Jen takes any questions on the general fund, I just want to again reiterate what she said is that the reserve portion that we're taking is more of a borrowing, if you will. As you all know, we're still, and Vance knows as well, that we're working with the Oregon Judicial Department to negotiate that agreement. Once we get to that place, I would anticipate that money coming back and replacing it. But certainly I needed a place to be able to process the check that we put forward. So that's what that is covering. And then the other thing, so again, reserves, that's the only portion, but we're not taking any other reserves outside of that, and very little contingency here. So again, just want to put that out there that we're still looking very good from a general fund standpoint, like I've shared with you in the past.
Good, thank you.
So are there any questions on the general fund?
Any clarifying questions?
The decrease in reserves is the anticipated amount from the state. I mean, is that a
wash? Commissioner Malone, that we anticipate it to be a wash, as we talked about in our discussions. We're still obviously negotiating with OJD, but I think based on some of the conversations that we've had with our contractor, I think we all feel pretty confident that the portion that can be used for land will cover that. As you know, it'll be a 50-50 proposition, right. Part of it financing, but yes, to answer your question, I believe it will cover it all.
Thank you.
Wash, it'll all come back.
All right. Next up, we do have the Fair Fund. And so within cultural and educational operations, the requested increase is $620,777. The sources of revenue for this increase, one is there is an agreement with the NAEP department to reimburse some lost revenue during the pandemic. So approximately $298,000 is going to be transferred then to the Fair Fund to offset those lost revenues, because they are running kind of on a fine line in terms of expenditure levels. And so once that transfer is made, we'll be looking more deeply at the revenues and what's going on there and the expenditures to make sure everything is coded correctly and in line. Additionally, they did receive funds from the Oregon Fair Association, and that is for a capital project requirement. And so that has been added into the TLT cost center, since that's where all the capital projects are at this time. And then lastly, there was an increase in revenue for private donation and insurance claim recovery funds, and that's to repair the long table and the shelter that was damaged by the tree. And so that is the requested changes for their budget. Are there any questions? It's one of the easy ones, I'll say. Next up is the American Rescue Plan Fund. Within general government operations, that increase, like I had mentioned, changed to $9,079,937. Within that, there are an increase in appropriations for the evacuation routes, to establish expenditure authority, to offset the revenue that we had received for a private donation for that project. We are also establishing expenditure authority for the full amount of the crisis center funding. And so you will see that we are showing the full amount of revenue from the Department of Administrative Services Fund. And then additionally, I am reducing, actually, there was an interfund internal transfer of 1.5 million from ARPA to the crisis center in that fund that I no longer need now that the project is fully funded. So I have eliminated that transfer and reallocated for some of the other items. One being, then there were some additional nonprofit grants and capital expenditures as part of the ARPA plan, which was discussed with the board previously that you are aware of. And then the other big one would be the JSIP land purchase. And that was 4.25 million in the American Rescue Plan. And that is coming out of the contingency in American Rescue Plan fund simply because it was not put in the budget because we didn't know the cost at the time. And then lastly, with the transfers, it is a decrease of $529,935. As I stated, one, there was a net zero because I did decrease that 1.5 million transfer. And then in addition, there is the 298,000 transfer to the fair fund for lost revenue. There is an additional $207,000 transferred to Fund 514 for phase 2 of the Calapooya. And that is simply because 207,000 got missed in the last supplemental based off the ARPA projection. So we're just cleaning that up. And then this one I will let you reference when I'm done talking about it here is a transfer to Fund 520 for Fleet Services Bridge funding. And that amount is $465,065. And I will let Rick speak to that.
So just a couple things. First, Madam Chair, members of the board. When we say ARPA, I think a lot of times, we think of the $18 million that we've gotten. And I guess I just wanted to provide some context. The way we're accounting for this is certainly that includes that 18 million, but we also have state dollars that come from ARPA. We also started, as Jen alluded to, the $5.5 million of general fund that we got during the special session for the crisis center. So we're kind of trying to package all that because it makes sense to keep it all in there. So I just wanted to explain that if you at some point look and say, wait a minute, you have 18 million, but you're showing like $28 million there. So it's an accounting of all of that. Also, we're overdue. One of the things I would like to do is bring our new grant manager who just started yesterday in front and be able to give you a report on ARPA. I think we're a little overdue to be able to do that, but we'd really like to share out not only the expenditures, but some of the outcomes we're now starting to get from our sub-recipients that we put out there. The last thing I'll put out is, as Jen alluded to, so again, there's a lot of movement here as it relates to various things. One of the areas that we had identified from the previous binding was related to our external fleet. And this was, I think all of you know, and this is, I think it's been discussed prior to my being here, that we had about a $450,000 deficit in relation to this. So what we had done is planned ARPA dollars. I mean, revenue replacement is a appropriate use. It is within the budget. It doesn't take from anything that we have planned in this, but this will essentially solve that issue from the last biennium. Down the road, I think we will need to have some further discussions as it relates to our current fleet. Joe and I are having some conversations with Gary as it relates to kind of where we stand in terms of that particular program and trying to be able to address some of the revenue challenges that we've had related to that. So more to come, but I just wanted to explain that was from the previous binding that we're solving. It doesn't address this particular binding.
Sure. Question.
Yeah, would you define external fleet?
Yeah, I'm sorry. So as it relates to our fleet, our entire fleet program, we have essentially a enterprise fund, as we call it in accounting terms, that is focused on any business related to providing services to other outside clients, not non-county government, could be in our case, Philomath, City of Corvallis, a variety of other partners. So that's all accounted in one particular fund, whereas our internal fleet, everything that is county related, is all managed within a separate fund. So as it relates to those, so those are both pulling apart. So as it relates to this particular issue, it was related to the external component. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and you're talking about repairs, maintenance.
Basically all of the costs associated with going to that particular service to our external partners.
Commissioner Miller, I'd like to expand a little bit on that as well, if I could. So one of the things that we did, and I'll have to think back further, it's been probably at least 2 years, maybe even as far as 3 years, is really to begin to get a handle on our costs and our revenues regarding fleet. We used to look at fleet revenues as one and the same, if you will, whether or not they were coming from internal county departments or whether or not the revenues were coming from external agencies, such as fire departments, as an example, or other public works departments. And so a number of years ago, we made a change so that we could really begin tracking separately our internal fleet costs versus our external fleet costs to provide those services. And one of the things that we found, at least in my opinion, is that we continue to be challenged financially by providing external fleet services. We're going to have to make some changes, and we did make some changes to our rate structure 18 months ago, 24 months ago, but it's not enough. And if we're going to continue to provide external fleet services to other agencies, and if it's our business plan to ensure that those agencies are funding the expenses associated with those services, we've got to make some changes. And so you'll be hearing more details about this as we go into the next budget, but there are some business decisions that we're going to have to make because we can't continue to operate, in my opinion, with the financial plan that we have now relative to fleet.
Great, thank you.
And I have a question for the board. Is this format working well for you? Having Jen so graciously go through all the points. I know we did get it ahead of time, so we can continue doing that. We could, if you have any specific funds that you'd like to, bring up and talk about specifically, we can do that. What would the board like to do?
I am fine not going through it in detail.
Me too.
For the sake of time and the fact that we've got others waiting.
All right, make it so. So any highlights that you'd like to hit? Points of clarification.
I think my main questions were about the ARPA funds. And, I think we covered that to my satisfaction anyway.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Again, I appreciate. Oh, did you have a?
I just might add for discussion's sake, just as and appreciate the summary on this. I think the only what I would call material portion to point out to you as we move forward is the Building Development Reserve Fund. You will note there that is a $23 million supplemental increase. That is accounting obviously for our portion of the courthouse that is coming from the state. Along with, we also had received an additional $2 million. So this is a fund that we are placing the courthouse in. Jen and I agreed we wanted to really isolate that. You will obviously be hearing more from us on this as we look at the cost of borrowing to help supplement our match and start to get into the construction. So I just wanted to put that on your radar just so it wasn't surprised.
Perfect. Thank you. Any other highlights that you've, okay. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your patience. And I also appreciate having all this detailed information in the packet that gave us plenty of time to review it. And of course, I'm sure if any of us have questions, we will reach out to you. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
We know where your office is.
We do. We can just scamper right over.
I'm right here with you.
Oh, I'm sorry. There's a motion. Thank you, Commissioner Ojiro.
I move to forward this item to the October 18th, 2022 board meeting for a public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
Thank
Now
you.
you may leave. Okay. Moving along to the next agenda item. 4.4, discussion of the County Code Chapter 40 amendment and rural community engagement regarding House Bill 4123 with our very own Rebecca Taylor. And I see Julia Arena is with us as well. Welcome.
Yeah, and Greg Brett from Community Development.
And Greg Brett, welcome.
Thank you, commissioners. So actually, the real intent today is to ensure that we can extend the provisions of Chapter 40 of the Benton County Code, vehicle camping at religious institutions. It currently has a sunset clause for this December 31st. And so we want to make sure that we have an opportunity to remove that and move forward with the first and second reading for that part of it. So that's really the objective today, but we also felt that this would be a good opportunity to provide an update on the work group's progress around this topic, because it was in November of 2019 that our work group came before you and actually discussed researching different ideas for alternative sheltering options in our community, whether it's through code amendments or different types of programs. And as you and the rest of the community know, a lot has happened since November 2019. A lot of work in our community has been done around this topic. And so we wanted to take a moment to let you know that we are incorporating the new resources. Specifically, House Bill 2006 came out that amended the ORS that Chapter 40 is based on, which enables some more local autonomy as far as what the Chapter 40 code could enable for our community. But then also, as you know, we actually came here a couple of weeks ago to talk to you about House Bill 4123 as well. And there's an outreach component and an engagement component in our community, as well as a strategic planning process that would look at our internal operations as far as related to homelessness. And so we wanted to make sure that as a work group that was formed well before that these resources were even available to us, that we take a moment to step back and look at how we can incorporate ongoing work around Chapter 40 and the work that work group is focused on a broader perspective, other than just isolated to Chapter 40, incorporating all the stuff that has happened since then. And so just to really be clear, though, we are on quite a tight timeline to make sure that we can amend Chapter 40 because we have to do a first reading and a second reading. We need 30 days between that. We have November 1st queued up and December 6th for the first and second reading, but we also want to give you some updates. So regarding kind of the work that we've started with our work group and the work group working on House Bill 4123, I think Julie has a good take on what we've done so far to kind of prime the community for these different projects moving forward.
Thanks, Rebecca. Hi, commissioners. Good to see you. This is Julie Arena speaking. I use she, her pronouns. I want to talk about the outreach and engagement that we're doing because the impetus has been that we want to remove the sunset clause of this specific Chapter 40 code, but it's provided an opportunity to really educate and hear from our more rural community partners and smaller city managers. And so we have started with the city managers. We've already met with Philomath and Monroe city managers, and we're scheduling with Adair to hear their feedback about what level of engagement they would like on this topic going forward. So we've done the educational part of there's this Chapter 40 code. There is an intention to amend it to remove the sunset clause. Here's what that might mean for you. Do you have any other stakeholders you would like us to engage and educate about this? And also, we're embarking on a pilot to coordinate our response to homelessness and homelessness prevention in an improved way and have better communication as well. What does that look like from your perspective in Philomath, Monroe, Adair, other parts of Benton County? So far, the reception and the feedback has been very positive, a wanting to engage more, learn more, communicate more, establish communication pathways, and be engaged. So we're going to continue that effort. Rebecca and I meet with a Monroe service provider group today to have that same conversation from the service provider's perspective, especially as it relates to the Chapter 40, allowing up to 3 microshelters or vehicles on religious property, because a service provider is really needed to help support folks, as you'll hear from Sean Collins in a minute. And also let them know the same thing we've talked about with the city managers about this pilot, to coordinate our response better. What does that look like to service providers? How engaged do they want to be? We don't want to assume that the answer is yes, we'd like to talk about this. We want to ask that question and then hear their feedback, because we ask a lot of our providers. We ask for feedback on the CHIP and on the regional health needs assessment. And so really wanting to know, do they want to be engaged and at what kind of level? And then we'll move on to religious institutions, of course, because they could be directly impacted and able to register to host folks. So we're asking our service providers as well, what kind of religious institution networks are there in more rural Benton County, to make sure we're connecting with the right folks so that they can be educated about it before they make any decisions to register or host people. So that's the kind of engagement we're doing, and it's providing a great opportunity to also kick off some of the public engagement for this pilot to better coordinate our response on homelessness and homelessness prevention.
Thank you, Julie. Yeah, and so just to follow up on that, some of that engagement also includes internal engagement. So with House Bill 4123, looking at the work group that was tasked with the different code provisions, giving a moment to, express with, we originally started out with a team with Community Development Health Department. So moving forward, what does that work group look like? And how do we identify that in a strategic plan when it comes to work like this, where we do have interdepartmental collaboration? So really, given the different capacity levels we have at our various departments, we're trying to be very cognizant of that as we move forward with these projects. Also, we have Sean Collins here on behalf of Unity Shelter. We want to give a moment to give the community kind of an update as the organization who's actually utilizing this code provision at this time, and giving some feedback on maybe work moving forward with our group.
Welcome, Sean.
Good afternoon now, so good to see you all today. So I wanted to just give you a quick little update on the numbers of folks served and what this has meant, and some comment on the kind of the process of outreach and what it might mean to expand this into the county. So I look back to June 2020, which on the timeline is when the conditional use permit was filed, was approved for Safe Camp, the first place that we had micro shelters in place. And since then, we've served 76 people through that program, and 39 of those have become housed or moved into other transitional housing programs. Of all of the people that we've served, only 4 have actually exited the program to return to homelessness. That's a very strong rate of success for a housing program of this type, and I really think it underscores the capacity for something like this to work in restoring people to housing. The thing that I think has really been key to that is to have a very engaged organization that is working on case management, connections to services, making sure that people have basic needs met. And so as outreach is done, as work is done to explore expanding this into the broader county, I think it's very important to focus on that aspect, that the services, supportive services and case management are really key to that success. And that takes time and money and effort to be able to make that happen. For Unity Shelter, that has been kind of part and parcel of the program from the beginning. It's grown from just Safe Camp to now 31 micro shelters in 6 different locations. One of them is operating under Chapter 40 right now at Life Community Church on Highway 99. I think that the other thing to consider in terms of the Chapter 40 as it's currently written is there are a couple of things in there that might be worth consideration. One would be the limit of 3 units. So right now within Chapter 40 code as it's written, that is a fixed limit, and there's no provision in there for any kind of expansion beyond that. So something like Safe Camp, for example, there's no, beyond the conditional use permit process, there is no other process to expand if a religious institution wanted to say go to 4 or 10. And so there is some model code that you might look at from Bend, where they have set some of that kind of path up in their code so that you could create a small group of micro shelters with a simple approval that's equivalent to what goes on now. If you wanted to go to X number, beyond that, there might be a requirement that it come back before, say, the county commissioners. And to go beyond that, there would be a more formal proposal process. So there are some options out there that have been explored that might be worth looking at. I think the other thing to consider is just whether or not you would want to expand this beyond the possibility of religious institutions. And because there might be other properties that would be more appropriate in different church settings, they may not have the property to be able to do this, but there might be an adjacent property owner that would be willing. I think in the city, they have said, in the city of Corvallis, said that this is possible in religious institutions or business properties. And they really, what they restricted it to is not a residential area. And I think part of that was to make sure that it didn't become kind of a backdoor path to create space for auxiliary dwelling units, accessory dwelling units. So I do think that there's some great opportunity there to look at that. The code as it is great. As far as I'm concerned, it definitely serves a need and one that's very pressing and could work, I think, very well in rural communities.
Thank you. I noticed my mic path is blinking green and red. I don't know if that's an issue.
Battery's dying.
Can you guys hear me okay still? All right, can I plug in the USB into the, like this? Yeah, it's in the battery pack now. Okay, I unplugged it and I replugged it in again. That always works, huh? Okay. Comments or questions?
Yes, please.
And I think that's really the intention of some of this outreach and engagement. Are there rural churches interested? Are there rural entities that aren't churches, like Philomath Community Services or the new Kepi-Naknak Resource Center in Monroe? If there's interest, then that will inform our efforts going forward.
That was my primary question, was whether we were going to entertain expansion to other types of properties and the cap on units. So, and I recognize there are time constraints, so it might be a two-phase process. We always anticipated that it might be a multi-phase process. I'm looking at Greg. Yes. So yeah, we don't want this to go away. Sunset, removing the sunset's important.
And the unique, I guess, advantage we have is we've had this in place for several years now. And so we kind of, and we've learned a lot as a community generally with even some of the things we did in response to COVID as far as the disruptions to the social services at that time. So we've learned a lot more about what this type of use looks like in our community. And as we engage our rural communities, as Julie was talking about, specifically and very intentionally under the framework of House Bill 4123, we really feel like this is going to be part of a larger picture to make sure we're not going off and chasing maybe this use to find out that it isn't really responding to our rural communities' needs. So really taking that step back and looking how this fits in with the larger landscape. So yeah, any specific questions regarding the process and this between now and December?
So basically, as I understand it, what you're proposing between now and December is just going ahead to remove the sunset and then continue to engage with rural communities to discuss these other issues and whether or not changing the eligible property type and going beyond 3 units will address issues in those communities.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, this fall we'll focus on removing the sunset clause and then hearing as we move forward what type of engagement, level of engagement, so we can hear what the rural needs are and say, how do you want to help support folks in your own community who might be struggling? What does that look like?
Very good. Other comments or questions?
Just that the ask today is to remove the sunset clause. And
yes, and share a little bit of
Period.
information, it looks like.
So much has happened in the past 3 years, just confirming your original direction.
Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Any other comments before I call for a motion?
Thank you for creating the chapter 40 code and
Well, thank you for all of your work.
Yes.
All right, do I hear a motion?
I would move to direct staff to prepare an ordinance for public hearing to remove the sunset date of chapter 40.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, commissioners.
Have a wonderful afternoon.
And we still
Okay.
have business to do.
We are gonna just fly right through it. So we have the consent calendar. Do I hear a motion to approve the consent calendar or make any changes?
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. All right, let's see, next up, we have the proclamation. I'm speaking slowly because I'm stalling for Brian to get here. Oh, and I see Sheriff Van Arsdale has clicked on.
I did just reach out to Brian. He's in Eugene at training, and so I just wanted to let him know he was up. He should be logging in momentarily.
All right, thank you so much. While we are waiting for him, is there any business under other that, anything else for the good of the order type of stuff?
Just now that they've all left, thank them for their efforts. I remember being on the board for the original discussion and trying to be careful and limit, and we'll give it was uncharted territory, and trying to be careful and thoughtful and putting the sunset date on it. Well, this might not work and need to start over. And I think we've made pretty good progress, a little slower than would be ideal, but considering all the challenges, Julie for the county has done a outstanding job. I just remember being a one-person band there for better part of 2 years, I think, and managed to not get too overwhelmed, and then the state starts stepping up and realizing that the local governments, local nonprofits can't do everything on our own.
Yes, and we definitely appreciate all of our staff's support, the service providers, especially, Julie. I mean, she really carried us through. She's done a lot of great work for us, and I was on the planning commission when this was all happening, the chapter 40 stuff. So yeah, we have come a long way, as staff said. I wish I had my Jeopardy music queued up.
He told me he's logging in.
Perfect. Sheriff, I apologize for the crazy timeline today, and thank you for your patience.
No worries.
So Sheriff, have you recovered from your COVID shot? Oh, you're mute.
I think I'm 100%.
Good.
It shouldn't be. Sure, I'm not.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Look at that guy.
Oh my gosh, I apologize for the delay and the noise. I'm at the Oregon Emergency Management Association conference, so just running in between.
That's okay. You have nothing to apologize for. You are busy doing work, and our agenda got kind of crazy today. So thank you for coming to read the proclamation. In the matter of proclaiming October 2022 as the Great Oregon Shakeout Month in Benton County. So please take it away.
All right, thank you, commissioners. I'll go ahead and read that now. So whereas the threat of Cascadia subduction zone earthquake will greatly impact the entire region, including the residents of Benton County, Oregon, and whereas the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, have identified the Cascadia subduction zone earthquake as a major national level threat. And when individuals take responsibility for preparing their families and their communities, the chance of survival and return to normalcy following a disaster is greatly increased. And the Great Oregon Shakeout was designed to bring awareness of the threat of both crustal and subduction zone earthquakes. And the Benton County Sheriff's Office Emergency Management Division partners with federal, state, local, tribal, territorial, private, and volunteer agencies to inform individuals on how to take action through our public education campaigns and community exercises. And residents, businesses, and visitors of Benton County, Oregon are urged to plan ahead for all disasters and encourage their family and friends to also do so by participating in annual readiness events and drills. And Benton County Emergency Management and the Benton County EOC staff will participate in the national level exercise Cascadia Rising 2022. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the Benton County Board of Commissioners, October 2022 as the Great Oregon Shakeout Month, and encourage all community members, businesses, and visitors to develop their own emergency preparedness plans and practice basic earthquake safety drills, such as drop, cover, and hold on October 20 at 10:20 a.m. Pacific Standard Time.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions or a motion from the commissioners?
Well, just a comment. I appreciate the couple mentions of readiness drills and practice. And this is a challenging potential event to get ready for, but really appreciate your efforts, Brian.
And I will say that, hearing from the state resiliency officer, there's a lot of changes coming in our approaches to preparedness here in the state of Oregon. And then hearing from FEMA again, that this is again the #1 national level threat outside of course, war that would impact the nation. So again, it's a huge, huge focus and lots of discussion of everything we do in emergency preparedness. And it just goes along with our wildfire campaigns, as well as our recent COVID events and flooding and ice storms and everything else. So I appreciate the opportunity to present this proclamation.
Very good, thank you.
I would move approval of proclamation number 2022-019 in matter of proclaiming October 2022 as the Great Oregon Shakeout Month in Benton County.
I'll second that.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you, Jeff and Brian, for your patience and your flexibility. All right, and with that, I will adjourn the meeting at 12:19 p.m. Bye, everyone. Have a great afternoon.